What's the width under the foot?
88,
Yep,
all mountain ski.
yep.
I don't want to go any wider. Good evening, and thank you for tuning in or coming tonight, November 4th, workshop agenda. First item was going to be an executive session on economic development. That has been canceled, so we will not be handling that topic. So we'll move on to item B. Item B will be timber harvest, shoreline zoning amendment, option 1. I'm going to have Mr. Eric Cousins be presenting on this one tonight. Thank you, Mr. Cousins.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This item is relatively simple, I think. It's responding to a state mandate that we need to update our timber harvesting standards in the shoreland zone. The city, like every other town in Maine, has to adopt a shoreland zoning ordinance that's consistent with the state standards. As a component of that, they've changed the timber harvesting standards and given towns 3 options of what they would like to do. The first option is to repeal the current timber harvesting standards in the ordinance, which were consistent with the state standards at the time that we adopted them, and replace them with the new timber harvesting, or by repealing ours and making our standards not have any standards for timber harvesting, we would automatically rely on the state standards. So that's their first option, is get rid of our standards, and then the statewide standards will apply in our municipality as they do everywhere else. The second one is to actually go through and adopt the state standards word for word as part of our ordinance. The difference between 1 and 2 would be that if we adopted the standards word for word, the city would have the option of enforcing those standards as well, whereas in the first one we would rely on state foresters to enforce those standards in the shoreline zone. And the third one would be to essentially retain our own standards but update them so that they're at least as stringent as the state standards, and the state would review those to confirm whether or not they're at least as stringent. And the city would be entirely responsible for enforcement of those. This would not transfer the responsibility of enforcing the clearing for development standards. The city will continue to have those to deal with clearing that happens around developed lots, removing trees within 100 feet of the water. This would only apply to tree removal that truly is for the purpose of harvesting timber for a commercial purpose. We really don't have the expertise on staff to go out in a large woodlot and count basal area and estimate tree volume that the state standards requires. So staff's recommendation with the planning board since the beginning of this discussion has been that we should repeal our local timber harvest standard in the shoreline zone and let the state standard apply here as it does throughout the rest of the state. 176 municipalities have already chosen to do that, whereas 55 municipalities have chosen to adopt the standards verbatim from the state, so that either the state or the town has the option of enforcing them. And there are no towns that I'm aware of that have chosen to kind of go it on their own and come up with their own standards. The planning board workshopped this item and had a lot of questions about it. They had a Maine Forest Service representative come to the following meeting, workshop with them and the Conservation Commission. They've worked through the details of the 3 options, and they recommended unanimously that the city choose to repeal our standards and rely solely on the state. The state foresters have been available whenever we've needed them for advice or questions. There hasn't been an access problem to them as a resource. And staff and the planning board recommend that the council go with option 1 and repeal our standards to rely on the state. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Mr. Cousins, thank you very much. Start off on my left. Do we have any questions from anybody in the council? Councilor Young?
So do you go to a public hearing on this? What would the process be?
Yeah, the next step would be, there needs to be 2 readings, and one of those needs to be a public hearing. Depending on the timing of that schedule, we could choose to do the public hearing at the first reading or the second reading, but there would be a public hearing and 2 readings.
Councilor Chavez?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions. I think you had mentioned that we would still be offering permits to people who needed to cut a few trees on their land that happens to be on borders of a river or Taylor Pond.
Yes, we would still locally need to enforce the clearing for development standards. is
Well, no,
what
I'm
they
talking
call
about
it.
just a few trees. Somebody wants to cut, they got 5 or 6 trees that are dying or dead, they're within 100 feet or 75 feet.
Even a single tree within 100 feet of the water requires approval from the city next to Taylor Pond, Lake
Correct.
Auburn, or a river or stream.
But this wouldn't fall into this category. Well, they wouldn't have to get a state permit as well, or would they?
No, just to remove a tree or a few trees because they're dead, diseased, or dying would just be a local permit. If somebody wanted to do a timber harvest in a larger area where they're commercially harvesting trees, then they would need a state permit. But a simple tree removal of, a limited number of trees around a developed lot to eliminate a hazard or a dead tree, those would still just be a local.
It would be a local thing, because I noticed that they define timber harvesting as meaning cutting or removing of timber for the primary purpose of selling or processing forest products.
Yes.
So that's the only reason you'd have to get a state permit on that side of it, right?
Yeah, these standards that we're asking you to update and repeal would apply to that type of harvest where they're harvesting for the purpose of selling the timber for commercial products.
Okay, and then the other thing I noticed in the Title 21 that this refers to, it talked about crossing bodies of water and some pretty specific restrictions about how they do that. How would that affect like snowmobile bridges and stuff like that going on within the city or in certain areas? Will they still be able to go to us, or if they're building a trail and they got to put a bridge over a stream?
Yep, a
Would
trail.
they have to now go to the state for this, or?
If they were building a bridge and a trail for the purposes of timber harvesting, then that would fall under this umbrella. If they're building a trail or a bridge for some other purpose, then it wouldn't be reviewed under the standards that you're considering tonight.
Okay, so Chapter 21 only deals with commercial timber harvesting, and anything within it, like they did mention about crossing streams, had to make sure that it was built a certain way and fish were allowed to get through and had to be inspected and blah, blah, blah.
Under this ordinance, that would be only if the bridge or the crossing, however they chose to do it, was for the purpose of timber
Okay,
harvesting.
so it wouldn't fall into recreation.
No, it
Okay,
wouldn't.
thank you.
Any other councilor questions? Councilor Hayes, Lozani, Gary? I'm fine. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of these municipalities that have gave their blessing to the state to manage their zoning stuff, how many of them have water that's their drinking source?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure if I could get that information, but I could ask the water district if they knew how to get that from the Maine drinking water program.
Because on the surface, it sounds a good thing. Like you said, we don't have the expertise and it would save us money. But I don't want to jeopardize the quality of Lake Auburn by letting somebody from the state manage it if there's any thought that it could, in unintended consequences, make our water where we need to filter it or some stuff get in it that shouldn't.
So I think, as a potential assurance for that, we have, this ordinance deals with timber harvest within the shoreland zone, so all areas within 250 feet of Lake Auburn would be in the shoreland zone. We have an extra ordinance here in Auburn, an extra protection in the Lake Auburn watershed and the Taylor Pond watershed that requires somebody doing a harvest within the entire watershed, so any area that drains towards the lake, still has to submit a forest management plan for their harvest, and the water district reviews, their forester reviews those for us. So we would still have that protection in place.
Well, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cousins. We appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll be working on scheduling.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. Item 3. We're going to have Assistant City Manager Kroll and City Manager Creighton are leading us in a conversation and presentation on the proposed ag ordinances.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Would ask if maybe Eric and Karen could just come up to the front table, and then City Manager will be reviewing the PowerPoint presentation for us to begin tonight.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Assistant City Manager, thank you for still facilitating this workshop, and I appreciate having our assessor and Deputy Economic Development Director here with us. So we have a few slides to review. This is kind of an update on where we are. Hopefully people, if they can't see the screen over here, they can look to the right and see the information. So we've had a number of workshops, as you know, on this issue. I think we have narrowed this down to two options at this point. So if you want to go to slide 2.
It's coming.
I believe you. So, options for replacing the 50% income rule. We have the state farming land use requirement, which has been presented and discussed before, and then staff concept. State farming land use requirement, just to review what that entails. You're talking about a minimum size of 5 contiguous acres used for farming activities. Farming use eligible activities are crops, livestock, products. Does not include forestry, composting, marijuana, among others. Income standard is $2,000 a year. And there's an income report that the state requires every 5 years. Question, you go back to that, Phil. Question is, will we require enrollment in the state use program or use these guidelines to adopt a local standard? Farm means any parcel of land containing more than 10 acres, which is used in the raising of agriculture products. I just spoke about that before. In the previous slide, the property owner is required to have at least 5 contiguous acres in their parcel of land. Land must be used for farming, agriculture, or horticulture. It can include woodland and wasteland. Parcel must contribute at least $2,000 gross income from farming activities each year. I don't know if you want to have me go through the whole presentation and then have a discussion, or you want to stop at this point? You want to keep going? Okay. Staff concept, change the income criteria from 50% to 40% of household income. This is an incremental change, as you know, to see what the impact would be. Add an option to use median Auburn household income instead of individual income. And I want to emphasize again, median Auburn household income. The median Auburn household income is $46,976 per the Crossroads report, meaning lots that generate at least $18,790 in farming revenue would qualify. Lower earning households can qualify with less farming revenue. Can include additional components such as a farm plan if council deems necessary. Can include a special exception for non-conforming lots, 3 to 10 acres. Farm means any parcel of land containing more than 10 acres, which is used in the raising of agricultural products, livestock, or poultry, or for dairying. The term farm under the Agriculture and Resource Protection District shall be further defined as meeting the following criteria in this proposed ordinance. draft at least 40% of the total annual household income and or net farm income equivalent to 40% of Auburn's median household income according to the most recent decennial census data of the farm occupant living in the farm residence will be derived from such uses, and at least 10 acres of the farm will be devoted to the production by the occupant of field crops or to the grazing of the occupant's livestock. For purposes of this definition, the term poultry means no fewer than 100 foal, and the term livestock means no fewer than 20 cattle or other animals being raised for commercial purposes. Use of non-conforming lots, 3 to 10 acres in the ag zone. Proposal: give the planning board the ability to make exceptions on a case-by-case basis for properties in the non-conforming lots as of January 1, 2018, based on the following criteria: must meet the income standard adopted, notification of butters with a public comment. Here's the proposed ordinance on 3 to 10 acre lots. I'm going to read this again. There are people at home that are not going to be able to see this clearly. On lots greater than 3 acres but less than 10 acres, a dwelling may be constructed if approved as a special exception pursuant to section 60. What is that? Dash, I can't even read that myself.
145.
145B18. One family detached dwellings, including manufactured housing, subject to all the design standards except this citing requirement of section 60-173 as set forth in Article 12 of this chapter, accessory to farming operations, subject to the following restrictions. No certificate of occupancy shall be issued for any such farm residence until the barns, livestock pens, silos, or other such buildings or structures which are to be erected in connection with the proposed agricultural use as shown on the plans and specifications presented to the municipal officer charged with enforcement are substantially completed. B, after recommendation by the Agricultural Committee finding the following: 1, the applicant has provided a farm business plan that appears feasible and if implemented will meet the definition of a farm. 2, the parcel proposed can reasonably accommodate the proposed farm. 3, the applicant has demonstrated a commitment to the proposed farm use and the proposed residence will be accessory to farming. C, the parcel contains more than 3 acres of land area and otherwise meets the requirements of Chapter 60 zoning. D, in no case shall any farm residence constructed under the provisions of this section after the effective date of the amended ordinance from which this section is derived continue to be occupied as a residence if the principal agricultural use has been abandoned or reduced in scope below the minimum requirements as shown on the plans and specifications presented to the municipal officer charged with enforcement. Say that 3 times fast. E, any residence constructed on this article shall not be converted to non-farm residential use except by permission of the planning board based upon a finding that the abandonment or reduction in such use resulted from causes beyond the control of the applicant and not from any intention to circumvent the requirements of this article. Next steps. So you may want to have Eric and Karen add some comments or be available to answer questions.
I mean, obviously, thank you very much for the presentation. Definitely keep Eric and Karen here. And I'd like to turn it back over to, for continuity, the Assistant City Manager, if you'd like to, or a City Manager, either one.
No, it's fine. Go ahead, Phil.
Kind of lead this discussion on the council side.
Great. So if you recall, council, at the last meeting, we did kind of a straw poll just to see what we would bring back for this meeting. Income and the non-conforming lots were the two areas that had the most, the majority, I guess you could say, for items to continue having the discussion. Karen and Eric are here to help facilitate, answer any questions, but really we're at the point where when you look at the income standard, you have 3 options. 1, you can remain the same. 2, you can take a look at the state program. And then the third one would be some variation of the staff concept of the 40% plus the median income, which is new. We'll start the conversation with the income, and we can move forward from there. Any follow-up questions? Councilor Titus?
Thank you. You know, one of the concerns that I've had is going to the 40 years rather than the 50 is not doing anything different than we had before. So that, to me, is not anything that's moving forward. That's just same old, same old. When it comes to the 2,000 requirement and that kind of thing, I believe that that is just dressing. It's nothing firm. I really believe that can be overcome very easily, that part of it. I like the idea of the form-based code idea or something similar to it, so that a person does build in the ag zone, they build something that is a farm. We use form-based code downtown, right? I mean, for various reasons. We want the downtown to look a certain way, so there'd be nothing wrong with having a form-based type code for the ag zone. Whether somebody farms it or not, I think that we'd be chasing our tail. We'd be spending lots of money trying to determine, first of all, is the plan legitimate? Second, has it been, you know, substantially completed so that now you can have a building permit? That's all subjective. And then the $2,000 income rule. The way I see it, that's something that can't be a really subsistence proof that somebody is in farming, because you could lose money and still be a very dedicated farmer. So the income requirement is one of the biggest problems, because again, there's a lot of farmers out there that are not making any money. They're doing it for other reasons, or they're just breaking even or whatever, and they should still be considered a farm. So I really think that if our goal, and again, the council hasn't really made its goals openly and clear. Do we want to allow people to build residence in the ag zone? If that's this, then let's call it what it is. And let's let it happen, but with a form-based, so that if somebody did want a farm, they would have all the ingredients of a farm, but not necessarily a farm. Consider 75% of the ag zone is forested anyway. It's unlikely that somebody's going to take 12 acres or 10 acres and clear it for farming. I don't think that's even a possibility personally. They might clear 2 or 3 acres for a home and a barn and what might look like a farm if we had a form-based code. And that would put enough restrictions on it, so I don't think that we would have 500 people going out there getting building permits and building up the ag zone if we were very careful about how restrictive we can be on the form, just like we are with form-based code downtown. So I really think that this council's got to decide. If they don't want people building houses, then there's already enough in the way to stop that. But if we do want somebody to be able to build a residence in the ag zone, then let's call it for what it is and try to make that happen, or not. But I feel that the form-based code might be a way. Now, as far as the under 10 acres is concerned, that's got to be a very strict exception that our planning board would have to make, and maybe we give them some latitude to allow some of that to happen, but it better be for a good reason and not just because they own the land and they have the right to build on it, and as long as they're not upsetting their neighbor, and all the kind of things that go on whenever you change a zoning.
Okay.
And that's a separate question too. Right. I almost wish that we were doing that completely separate from the 10 acre and above, and now the exceptions. But I really think that we've got to decide. If we want allow people to build a house in the ag zone, then we got to allow people to build a house in the ag zone and do it correctly with some sort of form-based code and not try to come up with all this income stuff. But if we want to keep the status quo, we can do it very easily. Go with the 40%. And this council's got to decide which way it wants to go. That's all. I personally think we should go with a form-based code and not worry too much about income requirements. But
Councilor Lasagna?
I think it's called character code, is that right?
I think that's the name for it. Yeah, it's like a form-based code.
I disagree with that. I feel like that is something that came to us at the last minute, and it has nothing to do with farming. It has to do with building in the
Yeah, that's right.
ag zone.
And
And
I don't
for
think we're talking
me,
about farming.
I think, as has been brought up a number of times, is this to just build houses in the ag zone, or is it to support farming? And I come down on the side of supporting farming. And to me, it's clear that I look at what the staff concept, I have a few questions about it, but I look at the staff concept, and I think it addresses many of the things. I really, Councilor Titus, I really strongly think that we need to focus on, this is the ag zone, it's for agriculture. We need to be very mindful about that, because if you go down the road of saying you can just build whatever looks like a farm and you don't have to actually farm, that's just development. That's
And I
just building
appreciate
houses.
what you're saying, and that's the kind of discussion we need to have, and have council decide which way we want to go, instead of trying to paint a $2,000 requirement that, hey, wink, nod, nod, you got a farm, you can now
Go
build.
back to the Councilor Lasagna.
And I do have to say, in terms of the income, I think it's very different when you look at median income and what that means. That's different from 50% of your total income. If you're making $22,000 a year, 50% of your income is $11,000. If you're below the median income, then it's reduced, depending on what it is that you're making. So I think it's pretty clear in terms of income. Now, should it be 40% or 30%? I'm not sure, but I think we should try it and see what happens. I also agree that what's in the staff concept about the 3 to 10 acres, I think that is a good process. It will allow people to apply for this. It puts some restrictions so that not just anybody can build on that, but I think there are people who have that property and in all good faith want to build on it and want to farm. So I think the staff concept, maybe with some tweaking to me, is the way to go.
Councilor Lasagna, did you have your specific questions regarding the, Staff
Yes,
concept.
I can ask them.
Yeah,
One
that'd be great.
is on the staff concept, number 2, at least 10 acres of the farm will be devoted to the production by field crops. How do you put a house on that if all 10 acres have to be field crops? I don't know what
Yeah,
slide
go right
number it
ahead.
is.
Karen? Yeah, I'm going to try to get to that slide.
And maybe I'm misreading it, but it says, yes, number 2. At least 10 acres of the farm will be devoted to the production by the occupant of field crops or to the grazing of the occupant's livestock. Where does a house go in there?
So you'd have to have a lot larger than 10 to meet that. The black text there is from the existing ordinance, and we've showed the changes in red, underline, and overstrike.
Okay.
But
So
if
we
you
would-
had exactly a 10-acre lot, you're right, that wouldn't.
So we would change that. I don't know, I'm not asking you to do that right now, but I think that's important to consider. I also, on the 3 to 10 acre lot, number A, the no certificate of occupancy shall be issued for any such farm. And the last one, officer charged with enforcement are substantially completed. We need to be clear about, I think, what substantially completed means. One of the things that people have come to us about is that they're farming land, they don't have a house on that. Do they need to have barns and silos before they can build a house? I don't know the answer to it, but it's a question that I'm afraid it could be misinterpreted. What does that mean? And I don't, again, know the answer. So I had one other question on the 3 to 10 acre lot on E. Causes beyond the control of the applicant and not from any intention. And I don't want to be so prescriptive about this because we don't know what that will be, but I think we need to just think through, is there a threshold? I don't know. So those were my questions and concerns.
Great. Karen or Eric, any follow-up on that for right now, or?
I would just say that, injuries, illness, or old age have been the ones that I think they've talked about in the past for reasons that are beyond the farmer's control. But there could be others, too.
And we need to be flexible because we can't anticipate what can happen.
To that, I think, if I could follow up on Councilor Lasagna.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Very quickly. You bring up a good point in section, I think it was 2 or B, about the 100 fowl, or 20 livestock. Enforcement always comes back to me and city staff in time. Do we have anybody that goes out there and will go out there, or is going out there now counting chickens and counting animals on land? And maybe I think all the research we've done over the last couple of years, going back to include the Crossroads survey, talks about modern ways of agriculture, which don't require so much land and producing more revenue. And we've seen that during the last mayor's ad hoc, some case studies in northern New York. So it might be, in other words, I think it might be archaic to prescribe 10 acres in cropland or 20 head of cattle or 100 fowls where we can't, A, enforce it, and B, where it's probably it probably made sense 40 years ago, but not under today's farming standards.
You could see through the income, though, would tell you whether they're farming or not.
I think if you're going to have it, income covers it. Obviously, you got to be generating income from something.
Yeah. And it's
So-
not telling you that you can't do microgreens or something like that, it's just what's your income.
Anyone else? Councilor Gary?
Thank you very much. Eric brought up the fact that, the point that I was gonna wanted more clarification. If people, are we gonna make sure definitely that people are grandfathered in that have worked their lives on their home property? That if they get old and can't farm, that they're not gonna be put out of their house? And then the other thing was, you had said if somebody got hurt or injured, what if they got permanently disabled and they can't farm? Are we going to put provisions in what we're trying to do to cover those instances?
I think later in the standard, I don't know if it's the next slide that shows, but the way that that's handled in the current ordinance is that they could go to the planning board and show that the reason that they've discontinued farming or cut back on farming was beyond their control, and I think a disability or injury would be perfect examples of that.
Councilor Hayes?
Just a couple questions, and I guess a comment. Going back to character zoning, I think it's something to be looked at, but I think the council really can't make that decision. I think, we're bound by our comprehensive plan that we're working under right now. So that's why we're talking about the ag zone and really talking about farming. But I think it's something, we have the strategic plan that's moving us towards the new comprehensive plan. So I think it's something that should be addressed, certainly. I guess I had the same questions that Councilor Zanya has brought up. I am going back to the state farming land use requirement, just a question there. At the bottom, we will require enrollment in the state use program. Now, we do have some farms now that take the exemption if they have their property under farming and cropping it currently. So are we actually enrolled because of that, or is it the individual farm that's enrolled?
If I'm understanding, the occupant of the farm, so they have to meet all of the requirements to be enrolled in the special use classification. They're not exempt, but they are getting a lower price per acre for their farmland.
So does that put our city into the state use program?
No, it does not. It's individual to each farm, the farmer themselves, not the city.
Okay. So what is the state use program? Does it mean that we have to administer it if we are into it, or we just placed ourselves under the state program and the state,
I'm not, what state program?
I guess what is the state use program
I'm not sure I
that
understand
we're
what
talking
state
about
program
then?
we're talking about.
I think you currently administer the state special land use class.
I administer the special land use for each individual farm.
Okay, so it
I'm not
sounds to me
underst-
like we're already into the state use program then.
So maybe I'll help clarify this. So an individual can go ahead and apply to the state. They get that information through Karen. They basically provide the application to Karen and the assessor's office. But it is a state-run program. We just
So-
provide the information.
So I have to make sure that they qualify, and I have to make sure that they're reporting their income every 5 years to remain in the program.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking, what more would we have to do? This line indicates we'd have to do something more. We'd have to enroll into the state use program.
So the way that it's worded in here is that they must provide proof of participation or meet these minimum requirements of the state, the property tax program. That would be their requirements. That way an individual would not necessarily be mandated to enroll in the state program. However, if they did enroll, they could show that proof, or they would have to at least meet these minimum requirements.
Okay, so we're not saying the city needs to do anything more than it's really doing right now?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I guess going to the staff concepts, and I had the same question that 10 acres, we need to leave room for residents. I guess, you know, I still go back to the concern that I have in both, when we formed the ad hoc committee, we talked about legacy family, our legacy. And even going back to the 1984 review of the same issue, they were talking about, you know, grandfathering those that own property for a period of time. And even the Crossroads, you know, they talk about essentially legacy, you know, granting permission for families or extended family to build on the farm to keep it going. I think I still have an issue with the date of 1/1/18, because we do have on this council an individual that's bought property within the last, well, even the year prior to that date. So that's not legacy. So I think that there's an issue there, and I think it needs to be addressed.
Any other questions, comments? Councilor Young?
Well, if we establish 10 acres as being the minimum, and then we say about small lots, 3 to 10 acres, I'd like to stay with the 10 acres. But I have an idea that if the average lots are 10 acres, say the neighbor has 25 acres, if he could assign or lease or whatever the instrument would be, for the farmer that only had 5 acres could use 5 of the acres of the other farmer, renting it or whatever. I don't know what the kind of agreement would be, but it would keep the average lots down to 10 acres or greater, because we don't want a lot of houses and the density to get any more. Otherwise, you'll have a lot of people out there, a lot of houses, and there won't be any room to farm. And I'm not really in favor of having small lots.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councilor Young, just to give you some more information on that. Mr. Cousins, the maximum lots that could be built and farmed on was 37? Well, I just don't have, I just want to make sure Councilor Young isn't thinking that.
The 3 to 10 acre lots that existed prior to January. Yep.
Correct.
I think it was 37, or is it 34, 37?
Plus or minus 1 or 2, 37? Okay. So just to Councilor Young, it wouldn't be, there's only 37 total lots. Some of those are actually owned by the Brickyard and so forth. So maximum 37 lots that could even be appealed, if you would.
I'm just looking at it as a slippery slope. The other part is that there's two different people. There are people that are farming. They're also doing something else part-time. And then there are people that are doing some other activity that want to get into farming. And they can't qualify for this income. Farmer after farmer I've talked to said, we don't make any money. Any money they make, they just buy a new rake or a plow or something. They just put it right back into the business. So they have a different type of currency. I guess their passion is farming. If you could measure that, I think you'd have a case. If you can measure somebody's passion of doing it, the amount of time they're spending in that type of activity. It's their other job that allows them to do the farming. The farming's not what they're making the living on. They're making them living on some other side job, moonlighting or whatever, working in a factory or whatever. But what they really truly want to do is farming. Well, we're preventing them to actually live on their farm, build a house, and do the activity they really love to do. And if you have a farm, you probably really need to be there close by to see what's going on. And so that's what we don't really understand, why they need to have that happen. I don't think there's been the dialogue between us and them. We say, well, 18,000, you can do that. Well, they may have a year they don't make any money at all, but they hang on. They do something. They have a different type of currency than we have. They do bartering. You can't measure that. So I think we really don't understand what's going on.
Did you have a recommendation?
If you could measure their passion and the time they're devoting to their farm activity, perhaps that might be the answer.
Any other comments, questions? Councilor Titus?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to follow up what I was saying. My concern with the 40% rule is, okay, even if it's only $10,000 or $12,000, because it's 50% of 21,000 or whatever your household income, to show $10,000 in income after expenses for a farm is really a lot. That's as bad as saying that you have to have 50% of your income. It's very hard. That's a standard that most couldn't make. So I still go back to looking back at what is a farm. We can tell the difference between an industrial building in the industrial zone and a house. So why couldn't we tell the difference between somebody building a farm or somebody building a house, and set up a standard that says you can build a farm in the ag zone, but you got to build a farm. You can't just throw a two-story house on it and call that a farm. I mean, maybe we can, again, it goes back to that, character-based.
May I
We can
comment on that?
we can define an industrial building compared to a residential house, so.
Karen, do you have a follow-up?
I just have a comment. Both Councilor Young and Councilor Titus are going under the assumption that it's net income. When people report for the special land use classification, they're reporting the income that they earned for that particular year. It's not a net, this is how much I earned off my farm, and we don't take into consideration what they spent that year.
Just gross.
It's gross. We take gross, not net.
Follow up on that. Is there any provision in the state guidelines to attribute a financial or a dollar amount to donated goods or subsistence farming, what they've eaten or consumed themselves?
I'm not sure if there is or not. I have not come across that. All of our farmers seem to meet the requirements, so I have not checked into that.
Councilor Lasagna?
I know we don't have it up on this presentation, but you had done a very good grid that showed this, the income. And it was very helpful, I think, so people could understand that the actual amounts that it would require.
Yeah, I don't have that on this presentation.
But maybe in the
Yeah.
future, or
Sure.
sending it to us, I just think that was very helpful.
We can send it separately. Councilor Hayes?
I guess just getting back to Councilor Young's comment with respect to, he's okay with the 10 acres, and I think this brought up the last meeting, that it seems like we could all agree on moving ahead on the 10-acre lot size. I think where we're getting tripped up is on the 3 to 10, which again goes back to the 37. But I guess I'm wondering, would it make, if we could agree that we could come to a consensus on the 10-acre and move that forward, might
So
that improve?
if we focus on that, which Councilor Hayes just proposed, we could take a look at who's in favor of either the state or the staff concept with some modifications from what I've heard. Maybe we could start with, is there a majority that's ready to move forward with the income for 10 acres or more with the staff concept with some potential modifications? Those that would agree to that? I'm seeing a lot of head nodding, and then a couple no's. And then a couple no one is chiming in, so. Councilor Lasagna?
I would want to move ahead with the staff concept and talk about modifications.
All right, Councilor Hayes?
Yes, I would do the same.
Councilor Gary? No. Councilor Titus?
No, I'm more of the state 2000 rule if I were going to choose one.
Councilor Fournier?
The staff concept.
Councilor Young?
Since it's gross, I think we can move ahead
All right. If it's gross.
if it's gross. If it's net, then I don't think the farmers are,
With the staff concept, Counselor Young? Are you saying with the staff concept?
To change it from net to gross for farming.
gross with the
Gross.
staff.
Yeah.
Specifically, it says net here.
So there is a majority to move forward with that. Can we go back to the modifications? So what would those modifications look like? I heard maybe it should be 30% or 40%. Is there a consensus on which one of those, or, and that's the only two I've heard so far, is 30 or staying at the 40?
I'd also like to point out number 2 as a discussion point.
Right, we'll come to
Okay,
that.
good.
Yep.
So, and I know we don't have that grid, but I wonder if, and I don't want to slow down this discussion because I feel like we're on a roll, is just the idea of actually looking at what those income levels are, because it helps us all to understand what that actually means for somebody earning $25,000 or somebody earning $85,000.
Well, it was capped. It was capped. So,
When the staff was looking at this and coming up with potential change, the 30% was closer to the average income in Androscoggin County that was put out by the state, which was somewhere around 14, somewhere in there. So you are between that 30 and 40. You're in that ballpark.
13.8 at 30% of 46,000.
Is what?
13,800 is 30% of 46,000, the median of Auburn.
So I would suggest moving forward and looking at 30%.
So 30%, Councilor Hayes?
I guess because we were modifying the income level that we'd be applying the percentage to, I guess I would move to the 40%, recognizing that we're already lowering the thresholds that we're applying it to.
Anyone else can weigh in on that?
Well, I'm more in favor of the lesser of the two, the state standard, but if I were going to go with this standard, I would rather go with a 30%.
Councilor Fournier?
I'm in favor of the 30%. I was the last time that we talked about this.
Councilor Young?
30%.
Councilor Gary, you're not weighing in?
No, because there's not any or many municipalities that make a percentage of whatever you make. There is no income. I mean, I'm more on the lenient on a slide scale on what the state has. And the thing is, we're working our heart out, we're making staff work their heart out on this thing, and no matter what we come out with the commission that we put together, they may come back within 6 months or a year and totally throw out everything we've done. We're novices at doing this. They work with this. They know the state rules and what they're doing in other municipalities, and they could also, some of the people we put on there may know what they're doing across the state.
So 30% is what I'm seeing. The question next would be, within that same paragraph, would that be gross farm income or net?
Gross.
Gotta be gross.
All right. So we would make that change. Next piece is, as it comes to, as the mayor was mentioning, bullet 2. Maybe, is there a thought of either keeping that, adding language that is similar to this, where we could do a hybrid with the state regulation, where the state regulation does require the 5 contiguous acres, and then, or do you want to keep this language?
I think we do need to change it because otherwise, as it reads now, there's no room for a house. I would defer, I don't know if you, Ms. Scammon, have an idea of what is it, how much do you need to, I mean, is 5 contiguous acres and allows you 5 acres then to be able to build a house? And does that allow for a barn and the other facilities that you need on there? I don't know.
Karen?
I know, as has been discussed, 5 acres is the minimum for the farm land, so knowing that I have farmers that have that just 5 acres and they're making that requirement, then my opinion is that, yes, if you have 5 acres of contiguous farmland, then you could support a farm.
And then the other 5 acres could be used for a home and other buildings.
So I think what would be helpful, one, the staff could look at, like I said, a little hybrid here, taking some of that language from the state program, inserting it in and replacing that paragraph 2. But also it would be helpful to make sure, if we hear from the public too, on, there might be areas when you look at number 2 on this that we might not be addressing, that we should address. And so that would give that opportunity for that.
And if I could just reference back to some of the research that we saw, and we just talked about it before. I mean, the fact is they have to make a sizable portion of income from land. So at some point, something has to be developed. I think there's a lot of case studies that we looked at, again, that can show you can, create a lot of wealth off less than 5 acres. I don't want to be too overly prescriptive. And then again, I look at enforcement, which is one of the reasons, and one of the things that Crossroads and others have said needs to be addressed, and look like staff especially. How much time do we spend on enforcement, and can we enforce such a thing? If we're already enforcing income, isn't that sufficient? And I don't have an opinion. I just want to weigh that out there and have the council think about it.
I think it's helpful to hear what Ms. Gammon said, that there are people who are 5 contiguous acres, they're doing it, and then they're building what they need to build on the rest of the property.
So here's your slide. Brian was able to find that. So if you
Oh,
want to look
great.
at those incomes. It's not on my screen, so I can't quite see it from here. Brian, can you make that a little larger?
And that's with 40%, correct, of the median?
Oh, it's behind you, too.
That was a 40.
Yeah. So those were 40%. So you see the thumbs up were the household types, the models that were being used of a traditional farm of a household income of 30,000 with farming income of 20 would meet the current standard, the staff concept, and the state plan. A farm with dual income of a household income of 60,000 with a farming income of 30 would meet all 3. And then a subsistence farmer, $10,000 household income, farming income, again, would meet all 3. And then this is where we start seeing the change. The dual income would be the 80,000 household income, 30 farming. Certainly would not meet the current standard, but would meet both of the staff concept in the state, as well as the dual income low end of 30,000 household with 13,000 farming income would still meet the 2. And then the large farm with high income of 200,000, household of income of 200,000 with a farming income of 70 would meet the 2 requirements. And then you can see the last 3, hobby, in the farming supports 2 concept, that would only be the state plan, and then the hobby farmer 2 wouldn't meet any of those.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay. So I think we could come back with language for bullet 2 of this concept. So we could certainly bring that forward. So that will address the income, will address the bullet 2 requirement. I think we have support around that. The follow-up would be, and I know Councilor Hayes had mentioned about not moving forward with non-conforming lot, but is there a majority to not move forward with that? So I would look at where we are currently with the non-conforming on developing special exception. Councilor Lasagna, I think, did speak to that in her original about that outline of the with strict exceptions that was listed. Any other comments regarding that?
I would like to, I think, going to agree with Councilor Lozani on this. As written up, the policy and procedures on granting exemptions is fair. I am concerned that we can't not address it just because of one individual owning land there, regardless if he's a councilor or not. I don't think that's fair. But I would definitely support, as staff written, and what Councilor Lozani said about going through the process.
Others? Councilor Fornia?
Same here, going through the process.
Councilor Young?
Only if they can be assured that it's not going to make the area more dense.
Okay.
We have sufficient balance of larger lots.
So what would you like to see to assist you with that? I think we've talked about the 37 lots. I think if you go through that, I think there was 16 that might have been greater than 5 acres. So that certainly narrows that 37 down to 16 of potential, but we could break that down further. This was a while since we looked at that, so I want to make sure those numbers are correct.
I would like to be able to match them up with some other landowner that would make an agreement saying that I won't subdivide mine, so you can have, you can use some of my land or whatever to offset that, so you can get the 10 acres. Do some sort of thing in that mechanism, just so we don't have it, because we're going to end up with smaller lots, more density, and we want to keep the area. We don't know if these people are going to continue farming forever, and they may just have a house lot.
I think if you.
Anyways, Councilor
I'm sorry.
Lasagna, go right ahead.
I think if you, the page that is 60-145B18, that there are some good standards that need to be met in terms of being able to do that. Because I agree, you don't want to all of a sudden have these small lots with houses on it, but considering the number of lots that would qualify, and probably even less than the 36, but also the restrictions that are on here, and there has to be a plan that is admitted, and that the Ag Committee would do a first review, and then the Planning Board would do another review. Neighbors would need to be notified. I think that process would help prevent what you're referring to.
Councilor Hayes.
I guess here is where the state program would have some merit. Again, going back to statements that I made before, the benefit of the state program, it legitimizes the actual farming activity before there's any residential building. So there's a demonstration beyond just a plan. A plan is a plan. Nothing is being done. But under the state program, you'd have a plan, but you're actually demonstrating that you've moved ahead with that plan. You are actually engaging in a farming activity before you could even build.
So
have to
if I can
prove-
pause you there, would that go to what Councilor Lasagna was just referring to on bullet A, that no occupancy would be permitted until these structures were built? Would that meet what you're talking about, Councilor Hayes?
Well, I think the state requires that you actually have to derive some sort of an income from the farming activity prior to residential building. No, again, I think people can have a plan and put up a barn, put up a shed, and they have a plan, they could put up a house, but again, there's no legitimate farming activity.
So if the special exception demonstrated that they met the state standard for the non-conforming lots, would that be a possibility?
I see that the delay, that definitely engaging in the farming activity, in deriving some sort of an income, that you're filing, with your federal form, the form that we've talked about in the past, which again is very simple, but yet it is something that one would have to actually prepare and submit. So that, to me, legitimizes they're actually engaged in farming.
Sounds like we have a one or the other type of choice here. Either, if you can't have both, you can't be, piles and piles of regulation, but Counselor Hayes, I'm just thinking out loud here, what you propose is if they meet those state requirements on any lot existing prior to January 1, 2018, under 10 acres or 3 to 10 acres. Actually, at this point, to meet the state criterion, you're looking at a minimum of 5. Truthfully, probably 6 if you include the house lot. So it fundamentally changes it from 3 to 6 acres, I would assume. So you're looking at just lots from 6 to 10 acres would have to follow the state guidelines, but I don't believe you could have both. It has to be either or else we're just drowning in regulation.
Well, if you go down the list, we had 37. Actually, the state, 11 of those could fall under the state program, still with 5 acres being tilled, because you've got, 6 to 7 acres to work with. And actually, if you look down, pardon?
You need a minimum of 6 fundamentally for
Right.
a house and 11.
Any other discussion on if we're going to move forward with presenting this? All right, so I'm not sure if we've got clear direction on the non-conforming, but I think what just came from the discussion was that if the change happens with the 5 contiguous acres, then your non-conforming lots just changed. And so we can provide what those numbers look like for you, so you can decide how to move forward with that. But it sounds like at least with income, we'll be ready to present back to you with that language.
If I could, and just a hypothetical here on this one. Can you have an ordinance that gives you an either or? So let's say all lots between 3 and 10 acres. You either have to go through processes outlined, or you're conforming with the state statutes. In other words, if someone wants to have 3 acres of microgreens, 4 acres, and that's their plan, it's a solid business plan, it goes through the steps, but it's 4 acres, okay, that's fine. So the property owner actually has the choice of which path to take based upon their certain type of crop or activity. Is that a possibility? Because it might be a way, and an interesting, very small, honestly a small sample size of 37 lots, a way to really look at what's effective and still give small farmers a chance to work their land.
Eric, do you have any follow-up on that?
I guess I would definitely want to get a second opinion on that, because what you're effectively doing is you're giving a lesser standard or more permission, I guess, to use a smaller non-conforming lot than you are a conforming lot. So it's actually easier to build a home on a non-conforming lot if we did that. But that would be the only concern.
Other comments regarding the non-conforming? Councilor?
Would you open up the window for more non-conforming, a door, more non-conforming lots? Farmer sells off some land. It's under 10 acres. Somebody gets it and it's non-conforming.
Eric, is that possible currently?
If someone was to create one of those today?
Yeah, because a farmer has ag zone, farmland, right? He could sell some. My neighbor has land next to me. It's in the ag zone. He could sell me some acres.
Oh, to add to your 7-acre lot to make it equal 10? Something
No,
like that?
in my case, I have 1 acre. He sells me 5 acres.
Make your lot 6 acres.
Yeah,
and
6 acres.
Yeah, that would certainly be an option, selling land to an abutter.
And then,
But this states January 1 of 2018 as existing. On that date, that would create a new parcel of land post January 1, 2018.
However, what
Yeah.
Councilor Young was just referring to actually makes it conforming if you go with the 5 contiguous acres, because you would have 6.
But I guess I'd argue
I would have
that,
6,
but
and then
still
I
the basic
another house.
lot in the ag zone is 10 acres. So you can't create anything less than 10 acres. These are the existing non-conforming as of 1/1/18. but I don't think you can subdivide and create a non-conforming lot and then expect to build on it.
See, I was thinking of the scenario where Counselor Young has 1 acre, the neighbor
nine
has
to it.
50 acres, let's say, and they sell 9 to him to become a 10-acre, so he becomes a conforming lot. I think that could certainly work, but I agree, it wouldn't change the status if it remained less than 10 acres.
Right.
So Eric, you could not create a non-conforming lot.
If you did, it would be illegal, and you wouldn't be able to get a permit to do anything on it until you correct it, is typically how we handle that.
Okay.
So I think we have consensus to bring forward the income and the changes that we've talked about. We'll provide you more information regarding the non-conforming based on those changes, because that does shift the list. Any other statements?
I think, as you
Councilor Zaya.
mentioned, it'll be really important to hear from people who are living this, to say 30%, 35%, there may be nuances there that we can't anticipate, but obviously that's going to be extremely important.
Okay. All right, Mayor, turn the meeting back over to you.
We're going to stand in recess for 20 minutes until our meeting starting at 7. I'll now call to order this meeting of November 4th, 2019. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We've got 2 consent items on the agenda tonight. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion from Councillor Gary and a second from Councillor Walker. Show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed, abstained, none being. Consent items passed by a vote of 7-0. Next, we have the minutes of the October 21st, 2019 regular council meeting. Are there any corrections? None being. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the October 21st, 2019 regular
Motion to
city council
approve.
meeting. Got a motion from Councillor Fournier. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councillor Walker. Show of hands, all those approving the minutes? Opposed, abstain? Approved, 7-0. Now we're going to move on to communications, presentations, and recognition. First, Zachary Lenhart. He's going to provide an update on the consolidated, annual performance and evaluation report. Good evening.
All right, I'm here to take comments on the paper, which is, as you said, the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. This is required by HUD every year. It's the year-end report for the CDBG and home grants that we receive. This year, the major accomplishments for the program include the housing developments at 62 Spring Street, which is leasing up now, and 477 Minot Avenue, and 48 Hampshire Street and Troy Street. We also put in a raised crosswalk at the Chestnut Street from the PAL Center to the gully, and parking improvements over there. The 2 of the 3 planned gardens are done and are being operated, and with plans underway for a 3rd. We rehabilitated 29 units were completed this year. A combination, those were CDBG and home units. And then, of course, also the one of the larger projects we've done in a while was the senior center, which just had its grand opening this weekend.
Very good. Do we have any questions or comments for Mr. Lenhart, please? Councillor Lasagna?
Just one comment, and I look forward to sitting down and reviewing this with you when you get a chance. Is it appropriate to talk in the Make Neighborhoods Safe and Walkable about the Court Street study, or will that be in next year's?
The Court Street study is not CDBG funds, so
Okay.
that won't be in ours. We have funded the Library Avenue street designs. They'll probably kind of intersect a little, along Court Street, but the Court Street study will not be in this report.
Thank you.
Councillor Titus?
Yep, thank you. Just one correction, I think. When you talked about the senior center, that's not supposed to be the community center, isn't it? Community senior center?
Yes.
You had in your narrative here was for the senior center. This is a community center, right? The name of it is
Senior
actually
Community Center.
Senior Community Center.
Right.
So for the record, I'd like to have that be accurate if that is the name. Is that the official name?
Yes, it is. Senior Community Center, correct? That's what we.
He knows the name.
Well, he put senior center in the report, so.
Okay, yeah,
Okay,
we can.
that's great.
Well,
Just so we don't get confused, I
Okay.
guess, but.
Is there any other questions for Mr. Lenhart? Could you just, I'm looking at the supporting data here, Mr. Lenhart, could you just
Yeah.
talk to me and talk to us a little bit about money spent in Auburn for rehabilitation, prevent deterioration of housing stock, homeowner assistance programs? And I'm looking at some of these numbers here, and if you could just clarify percentage of funds used, how much was used, and so on?
What page is that?
Looking at page 4 now, the actual report itself, I don't have what page in your agenda.
Oh,
It's, page 45 of the agenda is where it starts.
Page 4.
Of the agenda
So
packet.
you're looking at the prevent deterioration of housing stock?
Yeah,
I don't
this-
have the exact numbers for what was spent on rehabilitation. This category usually combines both CDBG and home funds. I know, and the program years kind of cross over, so this is only reporting on projects that finished this year, not that were necessarily started this year. So we have spent funds this year on programs that will get reported in next year. So these are only projects that were finished this year. So this report, the money we spent this year isn't necessarily all on just these projects.
I mean, and let's, if we could, council, if you're in agreement, I think this has been a point that keeps coming up. If we could get just a mini report or a summary of funds expressly spent on rehabilitation.
You want like a report on the rehabilitation
Yeah,
program, on what we've been spending on it,
And how much is left available and how to apply. I keep hearing that it's too burdensome to actually apply for the funds and what kind of funds. There's still a lot of confusion out there in the general community. I want to make sure as many people as possible understanding what's out there, especially in our downtown areas, and how are we going to keep rehabilitating our historic blocks, for example. So.
yeah. And we are coming up on the 5-year consolidated plan, and so it's an excellent time to review all program and guidelines.
Very good, thank you. Is there anything else for Mr. Lenhart? None? Councilor Titus?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Looking at the first, I think it's the first page of the data, when it talks about anti-poverty, because I've always been wanting to get results back on what we are doing and how it is helping in that area. And we have two categories. One of them is public service activities other than low and medium income, and then homeless. So I noticed that I see 132% complete, which means so far, I read that we've helped a lot more people than we expected to.
Yes, so
in that
there's
category.
across the row, there's 6 numbers. The first 3 are for the 5-year plan, the numbers for the 5-year plan, and then the last 3 are for just this year's action plan. So for this year, we assisted 322 individuals, and there was an expectation of 263. So we exceeded it 122% this year. And for the 5-year plan, we're over the 1,000 projected.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking too is that I don't see anything in the homeless section. So I guess, first of all, that number, does that mean people have come to us and asked for help and we did help them and couldn't? Or how do we determine that 322? How does that number come about?
The 322, so there's different public service applications that we receive and that we fund, and they give us an expectation of how many people they'll help. For example, the literacy volunteers that help people learn to read, I believe they went over on their expectations on how many people they would be assisting this year. So that boosted the numbers. And I don't have the breakdown for each individual of those public service agencies, but that was the literacy volunteer was one of the anti-poverty, and I don't have
Well,
the other ones.
I guess what I'd like to see then, maybe as a follow-up to this, is where the data came from. I think I asked you for that once before. Obviously, these numbers come from somewhere. There's got to be some detail that we could look at that says, okay, we're at 132% because, and we had more than expected in these areas, and we could see the breakdown. Because when I see 0 in the homeless part of it, I thought one of the things that we were doing was helping students at the various schools that were deemed as homeless or could be homeless, and we were going to help them transition or at least stay where they are and not have to move out of their school district. There was money set aside for that purpose, which could be considered homeless. So I would think we've helped some people. I just would like to see where and how.
So what you're looking at right there is the CDBG. There was a goal, I believe, put in the 5-year consolidated plan. It was before me to possibly look at building an overnight shelter, although they put 0 there. The SHRAP program that you're talking about is a home program, and it's considered a rental assistance program. And would be reported in, I can't find it.
Would that be somewhere in this chart then?
Yes, it is in the chart.
Page 5 of the chart.
Yeah, so towards the bottom of page 5, prevent homelessness.
Oh, I see, okay,
In
yeah.
Auburn.
Homelessness / Lewiston, so is this like a combined account? Okay, Auburn, okay. Yeah. So that one
Yeah,
there,
so
looks
right
like
in
we haven't helped anybody according to this, or we have?
In the middle of it, prevent homelessness, the homeless is at 22 this year. And then the 26 above, we do 2 different rental assistance. We do the down payment assistance and the SHRAP like you're talking about.
I see, okay. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if there was such a thing as a database so we could get like a breakdown, because again, I'm very goal-oriented when it comes to these funds. We designate these funds, and then just throwing numbers at us sometimes can be confusing, because we're not showing where the numbers come from and what they mean, so.
On that note, I just got to tell you, I'm working with the state and the federal government, along with Zach and the Assistant City Manager, on identifying homeless veteran populations. It's almost, you're throwing the solutions against the wall. You're not too sure where the target is. We think there might be 2 homeless veterans in Auburn. Thank you. So, I mean, it's really, to your point, I will defend the department. It's really hard to get some of that accurate data. So, trackability. Councilor Zania first, please.
No, I was just going to say, if you can be more specific about what kind of data you're looking for.
Well, it's like I said, that first one we were just talking about, we're well over that item number 1, anti-poverty Auburn, so I'd like to know where that data comes from, and what organizations fed us information that said, well, this is a person that we helped. So it must be an organization, that, like if it's a literacy organization,
Yes.
they send you, well, we helped 48 people, and another organization says, well, we helped 28. These organizations that we are funding or help fund.
Yeah, we have,
They have the
this is
data.
a
They must have the data. It
consolidation
must be there.
of
Yeah.
lots of reports, yes.
Right, this is anybody that we support through the CBG funding, outside agencies, they send you data that ends up here.
Yes,
So I'd like to see that data specifically, that's all.
okay.
Especially on, not maybe on all of them, but the ones that are substantial at least.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All the agencies, the social agencies that put in an application and are ranked to get funding from CDBG, they submit a report of who they want to help, and then at the end, periodically, they do give Mr. Lenhart the data exactly, how many came in, what was done, where it was spent. I mean, like the Abused Women Advocacy for
Yeah.
one project. If we didn't give funds over to there, our homeless families that need to have a place to go would be living in their cars and on the street and couch surfing more than what our teens are doing. So that data is compiled. So the CDBG committee has that. And Mr. Lenhart, he's very good at keeping track of every penny spent, so each dollar that we get is frugally spent. And so I rest assured with him being in charge of the program.
Oh.
Granted, this is only a snapshot. It's at the distance, and I understand that you're trying to be fiscal responsible as well, and you want a better close-up view of what's going on.
Yeah, my concern is that sometimes we do things the same old way because that's how we've always done them.
Right.
So if we've got things that aren't working, we need to put the money towards something that is working. So I look at the community gardens, for example.
Yep.
That's a fairly big project that we've invested a lot of time and energy, and I guess our forecast is 4,300. We only helped 1,285 for improved parks, community gardens, Auburn. So I don't know what that means. I mean, we're over the season, so we're not gonna have any more. We may have something just before the season starts next year, but.
That's you're looking again at the
5-year.
5-year consolidated plan goal, and we have 2 of the 3 gardens, and we've got a plan for the 3rd garden.
Okay.
So there wasn't a garden completed. The second garden was completed in the program year before this, so there's none to report this year.
I mean, Newbury Street was, right?
That was, yeah, that was completed in the previous program years. It got reported anyways.
So when we're, again, just to bring this back down, this is just a report, though we're communicating right now tonight. All these questions about the drill downs are important. And if I could, Councilor Lozani, I'd like to ask you, as chair of the CDBG committee, to go back and work with Mr. Lenhart and the city manager, maybe producing relatively quickly a report on activity today. Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, and we'll provide the data that is appropriate. It might not be exactly what Counselor Titus wants.
I think we got an idea then.
Doesn't have to be exact and to the penny, but it's just showing what things are working and what maybe not working. And we have to vote on the CBD funding every year. And I think council sometimes doesn't really know what goes into that. They just vote for it, but they don't know everything that's in it.
There's a difference between what's working, what's not working, and how many people we serve. So we need to talk about that. What's working and not working can be a very complicated thing.
Absolutely.
Very good then. Mr. Lenhart, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We're going to move on. Next is a communication for the New Year's Eve Auburn event. Yeah, it's that time of year. This item is in place on the agenda under communications in accordance to Auburn's mass gathering ordinance. A public hearing will be held at the next regular council meeting and will go before the city council for approval. Who from staff will be discussing this?
I can cover that for you, Mayor.
Very good.
So those who attended last year, so I'm just trying to find the sheet for you. Those who attended last year know the size of the area that we held the mass gathering. Mass gathering permit is required based on the ordinance so that any event or activity has to meet certain requirements. If the city holds an event, we are held to the same standard as any other event that might be held in the community. So the mass gathering needs to come before you for approval. This is anticipation that there'll be 1,000 or more people in attendance for greater than 2 hours. The event is planned basically the same as it was last year, with the fireworks going off earlier, just as they did last year because of weather, but that is scheduled to go off earlier this year. That will be the plan. I don't think there's any other questions, any other follow-up regarding that, other than you'll see more information soon on the event.
I've been part of the meetings, and this is going to be the last official sesquicentennial event of the year. Really rolling into a more normal event type schedule. More really resident volunteers have been involved. It's been great. It's been nice. And the work is going pretty smoothly. So knock on wood, if we have fireworks at 10. Doesn't mean it's going to rain at 10. I think you're jinxing us. But, it will be a great event. Any questions from the council? Just more of a heads up than anything. Okay, very good. I'll open this up to the first open session tonight. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. I would ask you that you state your name and address and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak during this first open session? None being, we're going to be moving on to unfinished business, or I will now close the open session. Unfinished business. We have order number 111-09162019, approving the renewal of the auto graveyard junkyard permit for Morris Auto Parts located at 940 Washington Street North. This item was postponed at the September 16th meeting and again at the October 7th meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Forney, a second from Councilor Walker. Show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Vote of 6-0-1, the order carries. Next, ordinance 14-102-12019 is adopting the proposed zoning map amendment. This is a public hearing and second reading. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Gary, a second from Councilor, we'll give it to Councilor Hayes. He might have been quicker on that one. I'll open this up to the public. Anybody from the public like to speak? Just as reference, this is for Petros over on Minot Avenue, secondary access. Nobody? Okay. I'm going to bring back to the council. Any comments, debate? We've talked about this in several preceding workshops. No, none being. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote at this time.
Counselor Fournier,
Yes?
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Young,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Titus,
Yes.
By a vote of 7-0, the ordinance passes. Next, we have ordinance 13-102-12019, amending general assistance maximums. This is the second reading. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion from Councilor Gary and a second from Councilor Walker. I'm going to open this up to the public, since this is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Again, this is about raising the maximum allowable for general assistance. We had a workshop on this last meeting. Any debate, comment? None? Okay. And again, roll call vote if you could, please.
Counselor Fournier,
Yes?
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Young,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Titus,
Yes.
Order passes by a vote of 7-0. Next, we have an order appointing Kelsey Earl to serve on the Lewiston Auburn Transit Committee for a 3-year term. This item was postponed at the last council meeting on October 21st, 2019. Do I have a motion?
So
Mr.
moved.
Mayor,
Councilor Gary?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we indefinitely postpone this agenda item.
I have a motion to indefinitely postpone this agenda item. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. I'll open this up to the public for comment. Any members of the comment that would like to speak?
Talk about a postponement, is that a tabling?
Oh, tabling, I'm sorry.
Can't discuss.
No,
a
you
table.
can't. I'm going to ask for a vote at this time on the indefinite postponement of this order. All those in favor
Of postponement.
or opposed? Abstain? None being? This motion is indefinitely postponed. Voted 4-3. New business. We have an order approving the liquor license and special amusement permit for the Firehouse Grill. It's currently under new ownership. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved?
Second.
Motion from Councilor Forney and a second from Councilor Walker. This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this? None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, comments, discussion? None? Okay. We're going to do a vote by show of hands. All those in favor of this order, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstain? None being? Order approved, 7-0. Next, we have an order. We have order number 132-11042019. This is confirming my appointment of James Pross as a regular voting member of the Ethics Committee for a 3-year term. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Titus and a second from Councilor Walker. I'm going to open this up to the public for any comment. None being. I'll bring it back to the council. Council, this is in reference to the Ethics Committee and the appropriate way to nominate and that process. And the Assistant City Manager outlined that too in a follow-up email. Any comment, debate?
An excellent candidate.
I personally don't like the man. That's why I nominated him. I thought it'd be fair that way. No, he's a very, very good person,
he's
and his
got
willingness to serve is great.
Good background for this.
He's got a good background. for
Good
this.
background.
Any other comment? Nothing? Okay, perfect. Show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? None being? Order passes by a vote of 7-0. Next, we have Order 133-11042019, confirming my appointment of Leonard Kimball as a regular voting member of the Ethics Committee for a 1-year term. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Councilor Hayes,
Second.
second from Councilor Walker. I'll open this up to the public for comment. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment? Nope. Bring it back to the council. Mr. Kimball currently is on the Ethics Committee. Any other comments? No? Okay, by a show of hands, all those in favor? Opposed, abstained, none being. Order passes by a vote of 7-0. Next, we have Order 134-11042019, confirming my appointment of Jared Doyle as Associate Member of the Ethics Committee for a 3-year term. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, alternate member?
I'm sorry, alternate. Yes, you're correct.
Motion to accept.
I have a motion from Councilor Walker.
Second.
I have a second from Councilor Young. Anybody in the public that would like to comment on this? No? Bring it back to the council. Comment? Debate? None being asked for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Order carries 7-0. Okay, now we're on to reports. Very quickly, obviously lots happening in the city right now. We just finished up our last major event, which was truly our alumni weekend for the Sesquicentennial. It was a phenomenal weekend. I was very, very busy, and it was good to see some of the city councilors and a lot of residents at these events. From the football game, which was a packed house versus Lewiston, didn't end up quite in our favor, but it was still a great energy, rally towels, and a great school spirit coming out from both sides of the river. Moving on to the dedication of Museum in the Streets. We did that on Bonnie Bridge Saturday afternoon. Phenomenal. Just the fact that Auburn has all of their monuments up is a testament to Mr. Cousins and the rest of the staff here in Public Works that really put that effort out, especially since there's only 3 out of 15 up in Lewiston. So, for the grand opening, we met the challenge and we hit everything. So a lot of you know we had to postpone the bell tower, the raising of the bells, due to concrete malfunction. I'm happy to say the bells and tower are here in Auburn. I've seen pictures, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and a date yet to be determined. But soon they will be up again. And we'll be notifying everybody of that separate ceremony. We also had our alumni reunion at Lost Valley Saturday night. I talked to people that flew in specifically for this event, or the weekend, from Colorado, South Carolina, all over. It was phenomenal. About 300 people showed up. Really, really great. The person from the earliest class of EL that I met was from the class of 1944. And then someone else from the class of 1945. So they actually signed up to volunteer. And we said we were good. They could just enjoy themselves. But that was some really great school spirit coming through. So a lot of those stories happening. And it followed up, ending the weekend with alumni games throughout, especially the Maroon Mile at Edward Little, as well as a pancake breakfast and tours of the school. Everything was really, really well received for a first-time event of this nature. Yeah, we kept hearing a lot of people saying you have to do it again next year. So we'll debate that. We'll talk about that. But I do think, just from the reaction, it was well-deserved and a great way to build community. Obviously, tomorrow is Election Day. Polls open at 7. They close at 8. Polling places can be found online. If you have any questions, call our city clerk's office. I think they're going to be there around 4 o'clock in the morning.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock in the morning. Don't want to get you there too early. It's going to be a very busy day for them. But please get out there and vote. Any projections on voter turnout?
I predict 25 to 30% turnout.
25 to 30% turnout.
Yeah.
A little above normal on a off municipal election year?
It's about average.
About average? Very good. So let's try to break those numbers and prove Sue wrong. So don't forget, Election Day tomorrow. I'll open this up to councilors. Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a point of information on the agenda item we tabled for those perplexed city councilors, the reason it was indefinitely postponed, it has no reflection on Kelsey Earl that was nominated to fill that position because she's highly qualified. Why we decided not to appoint her is to leave the spot open so a regular Auburn resident can be appointed to the committee. Shortly, our resident committee member, there's a swing member between Auburn and Lewiston, so for a couple years or one term, Auburn has the edge seat. Then the next time, the Lewiston. And we're coming up shortly on that time when Lewiston will get that extra member. And if we have all staff and a counselor, that means no public person. So what we decided was to allow it so that a regular Auburn resident could be on the committee. That way they can partake of the process. It's not going to exclude her from attending the meetings. I mean, she can, and Lewiston has staff members there. So I feel comfortable with this motion and what we did tonight. As in councilor reports, and I know I will be brief, our age-friendly group is not meeting tomorrow night because of the election. Too many members are either running for office or working at the polls. They dedicate their time. And as was mentioned, our open house this last Saturday and the ribbon cutting of our new senior community center was excellent. The building turned out by far better than I thought. It's going to serve Auburn seniors and the community well. So I'm pleased at the work that was done. I'm pleased at the counselors that stepped up and moved this forward, because this is going to be a shining gem in Auburn, and it's going to be a vital part of their complex down in Pettingill Park. This coming Wednesday, First Auburn Seniors is going to be the first official senior group in there to hold a regular meeting. So they're going to be surprised at how it turned out. The other thing is our age-friendly group, and I'm not going to I got to keep promoting this, is having their second Thanksgiving dinner on Thanksgiving Day at noontime in the new senior center. And it's free. Any Auburn resident or people that don't have a place to go, we're not turning anybody away. And it's a wonderful dinner that's going to have all the fixings, so you're not going to miss out if you don't have a home to get a good meal and share company with other residents of Auburn. I know Councilor Walker's been putting a big effort into putting this forward, and he should be commended for all that he does.
I have three things. The recycling committee met on October 31st, and I was really heartened and impressed by the dedication and the willingness to put time in. We're going to be meeting every other week at 7:30 in the morning, but we're meeting twice in a row because this Thursday morning we'll be going to the waste-to-energy plant to look at that. Eventually we'll be going to Casella's to look at that and bringing in people to give us information. It's a much more complex issue than what it costs and whether you do it or don't do it, and I'm looking forward to working with that group. I was at a number of us were at the steering committee, the strategic planning committee meeting, and I thought that was a great way to thank people for their service and also to say we're moving forward with this. I really look forward to seeing that the city staff and administration begin to really think critically about aligning their work very specifically to this plan, because I think it's a good one. And finally, I think it's important to note that Holly Ewing at Bates College was a member of a group that got a $6 million grant to study the cryptobacteria, blue-green algae in Lake Auburn. They're going to be using drones and all kinds of sort of computer modeling and mapping, and I think we're really lucky to be able to have that resource looking at our lake and our water.
Both the mayor and I picked up gold shovels last week and put them into a pile of stone dust to kick off the airport improvements, bringing in through federal state funding and some local share, but $8.5 million, which will be an ongoing project through next year, really providing improved safety to the airport and hopefully bring us up maybe into a first, as far as departures and arrivals, maybe we could equal Sanford or maybe surpass them in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. Councilor Gary, the Thanksgiving dinner, do we able to get the kitchen available so we're actually cooking the meal there?
Definitely.
This time we're not having to worry about that. That's all
Nope.
set. That's
It's
good.
all full-fledged. It's even got a little dishwasher. I'm sure we'll have to wash some of the bigger pots that won't fit in there.
Yep.
But everything's up to code, everything's together, and what won't fit in the oven, we do have turkey roasters, so we'll have them set up all over. And we will be looking for volunteers to help with the peeling of some of the vegetables. So if any community or anybody that would like to come, we'll probably start trying to get stuff together that Wednesday before that Thursday because of Thanksgiving week.
Great. And Councilor Lasagna, one question. You mentioned that grant. I read in the paper it was $800 and something thousand for Lake Auburn. You said $6 million. Is that
The total grant is for $6 million to the whole group setting the cyanobacteria.
correct? But it's for Lake Auburn specifically, it's about $800 and something thousand, correct?
Yes, that'll be spent specifically, but I think they'll benefit from the whole grant, no matter what, because they'll be working as a group on different areas.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. I don't have much to report, except that we did have the final public hearing and budget for Androscoggin County. And I'm sad to report that we weren't able to carve out as much as we'd like to, but I want to thank the Auburn delegation, Councilor Walker and Phil for being there, and Larry Pelletier, if he's in the audience. Thank you all for being there. We tried our best, but it turned out that we had about a 5% increase in the tax levy, which for us means about a $100,000 increase. Now, that's not much because when you consider our share this year is $2.1 million. Lewiston's share is a little bit more this year, it's $2.4 million. So the validation is $2.5 million is the actual Auburn bill, and $2.9 million for Lewiston. So of that $2.5 million, we had a $100,000 increase. That's not too bad for us, but it's all based on valuation of all the towns within the county. And if some go up, then some of us benefit because other cities and towns went up and ours didn't go up as much. It's all based on a valuation and a percentage thereof. So anyway, that's really all that I have to report.
Councilor Fournier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I would like to thank Andy and Larry for the work that you've done. Having been a former commissioner, I know that it's very time-consuming, and I know you go line by line, and you've done a good job, a good service. Thank you very much for representing the city. I only have one thing to report, and that's regarding what's transpiring right now in the school committee, in that we are working on Superintendent Grondin's evaluation. We are at, as of last week, we're at step 5 of the policy, and we are following policy, and we have slowed it down. And where Superintendent Grondin submitted her self-evaluation. And this week, we're meeting every week to work on this. This week, the school committee completes our own evaluation of the superintendent. And this process will continue in the next few weeks with the last step ending by or before December 31st.
Good. Thank you very much for that. Councilor Walker?
Thank you.
Councilor Young? I'm just joking. Back to Councilor Walker.
Yeah, I know, he likes to put the pressure. I want to thank everybody that came to our new community center at Pettingill Park. Got that right, huh? Thank you. Anyways, we had a great time. We had over 100 people total that came to the new community senior center at Pettingill Park, and we had a great time that evening. I think you're going to be really overwhelmed with how many people in this community is going to really want to be part of using this building. I know the report that we got handed tonight, where how many people participate and will and won't and whatever, but there's a lot more than what's on that paper. This was put out a little while ago, so it didn't have the chance to really get accepted as a building and then put all this stuff on it, because it's pretty hard to say we're going to do all kinds of things when we've got 50 inspections that we know we've got to go through, and we've got to meet all of this. And that was definitely not an easy thing to pull off in the time limit that people were expecting this to open. So I'm happy. I'm happy with the way the Recreation Department has responded to it. They were there. I was there all week long trying to help out wherever I could do something to help them. And they were there every day, at least 2 or 3 of them, doing something to make sure that this building was as clean as a whistle and impressed everyone that walked into it. And it sure did. There was not one complaint from anybody for any reason, and with good cause, because of all the work that the city really did to get this to shine like $1 million. Also, the Age Friendly will meet with its committee at the new community center at Pettingill Park, November 12th, 5:30. All of our seniors that would like to come and be part of our committee, listen to things that we have to try to focus for the future, for age-friendly, is welcome to come, listen, participate, be part of it. We try to meet for 1 hour. Sometimes it goes to an hour and a half. And that'll give you an opportunity to see what is moving on in the future for the city of Auburn as an age-friendly senior center in the community at Pettingill Park. Also, we, as Belinda said, we will be doing a Thanksgiving dinner, again, free. You don't have to be poor to come to this dinner. You're welcome to it. 12 o'clock, November 28th, Thanksgiving dinner put on by the Age Friendly Committee. And everyone that helps us out. There's a lot of people, we're not going to try to name everybody, but there are many people that try to participate. We ask for help. People donate money, people donate goods. Robert Hayes and his wife, they usually help by working with us and getting things donated to help to give to people that do need the extra food and stuff. So we just want to thank everyone that does everything that they can do to help us. And the last thing that most people do not know, not even the senior groups that participate down at Pettingill Park, new community center for the seniors, is we're going to put on a New Year's party this year, which will be in the daytime, and we'll drop our own fancy ball for all the seniors that do not like to stay up to midnight or be out at dark. All the little details have not been played out. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. So if you, as a senior citizen, and that's from the age of 50 up, that's what we call them, are welcome to this New Year's party that we're going to put on the 31st. The date and all that, I don't know at this point. We haven't met with the committee. So I'm kind of stepping out there on the edge of the cliff, hoping they don't push me over. So keep in mind, we've got some things going. Them are 3 or 4 of the things right there that are not in our list. And there are quite a few more that I know the city and the Recreation Department have put together. Thank you for the time to mention this.
Outstanding. Councilor Young.
Thank you. I went to that football game. It was kind of exciting. I think next time I'll bring my ladder with me because I'm a little challenged on height. But I did take almost 1,000 photos, and I guess I posted about 900. And I took a little video, too. That was a great halftime show. There was somebody who was videoing it, and I think they were showing it inside, right, Mr. Mayor?
There were.
So-
We're having simulcasts in the gym for people who didn't want to be outside in the cold.
Were they, is it going to be broadcast again?
That was
someplace?
broadcast on MB. I can't remember the acronym for the TV channel that we're partnered with Great Falls TV. It's
Okay.
this main sports network. It eludes me.
Oh. No, I was a little bit challenged with the lights and everything, but I was able to get some good photos, particularly one of the one touchdown that our Edward Little team was able to accomplish. And I did go to the pancake breakfast too. My wife and I did. And the food wasn't too bad for cafeteria food. Pancakes, usually I like them a little bit bigger, but they were a little, I like silver dollars or so. And the strawberries, the blueberries, that was very tasty. Now, I want to congratulate the 2 Edward Little girls that went to the state meet. Peyton Bell, which is a freshman, placed 9th and is going to qualify to go to New England, so I don't know exactly when that was. And Lil Vincent came in 67th, and she's a junior. Maybe next year we can take the whole team to the States. That would be a good idea. You got to get some recruiting. Get more of those freshmen in there that are really fast, like Miss Bell. That's all I have to report this time.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments. Thank you, councilors, mayor, for your comments regarding the homecoming event. It's great for the city to have those kind of events and activities. I want to express my gratitude to the staff, the Auburn team that have been involved. There have been a lot of folks that have been. I'm going to mention a few of the folks. Hal Barter, who's done a great job, as Councilor Walker talked about regarding the Senior Community Center. Sabrina Best, in terms of the homecoming events and helping with the coordination of those events. Phil, and his role. Michael Chamings, with his support, the Senior Community Center, and Zach with the CDBG funding, making sure that that's lined up correctly, and Liz Allen. Those are some of the staff that have done a great job. We're very fortunate with the team that we have here with the city, I think, and I appreciate the work that they're doing. Both Phil and I do. I also want to mention on the streetlight project, the LED lighting, that's almost completed at this point, if not completed. And we've also restored a number of streetlights to residents, and I've had some nice comments from people, which is nice to see. And on the strategic plan, thank you, Councilor Lasagna, for mentioning that. I appreciate the councilors that were there and the mayor's participation in that final meeting that we had on that phase of the strategic plan. The process going forward is to have a workshop with the new council to brief the council on the strategic plan, get direction from the council, and then develop a work plan to move forward and implement it. And I'd like to defer the rest of my time to Phil to give an update on the age-friendly activities and programming.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So I did hand out probably about 3 pages of the fall program. If you recall, we had it when we were talking about a lot of the programming. We had a workshop where we discussed we have several different entities that we're combining to build this program. So if you think about it, we have the rec programming that takes place. We have First Auburn group that meets there. We also have an age-friendly committee that also has events and activities. And so as we look to merge them, the goal that the group will have is to have one single document where you could go and be able to get that information. However, we are partnering with different entities, so that'll be the challenge. The program that I shared with you, just to give you a quick highlight, there are 20 educational sessions that were scheduled during this fall program, 8 on a series called Matter of Balance, 6 was on living with diabetes, and 6 regarding dealing with chronic pain. We had 15 trips that we've either participated in or already planned. That involves hikes, walks, going to the fairs, holiday activities, snowshoeing, arts, which is a Broadway-style show, the Maine Museum, and a fall leaf peeping trip. So 15 trips that were planned through this program. We have an art workshop that is scheduled on here, as well as a World Diabetes Day event that the staff has been working with the committee to have an event that's scheduled, which will be an informational session with tables and being able to really provide information to the community. That's going to be November 14th. Plus, they also, as Councilor Walker mentioned, the team really worked on getting the senior center, community center, ready and opened for the grand opening. What wasn't included in there, but was on the calendar that I think Councilor Titus made a reference, is like pickleball, yoga, walking at Ingersoll. So there are other events and activities that are also taking place. The calendar that's on the website for the senior activities is really so that the seniors will know which building to go to for those activities that are happening there. So they know if it's in Ingersoll, is it in Hasty, or is it in the Senior Community Center? Especially with the changes of not having the Senior Community Center open, it was important that the seniors knew where to go for that. We have upcoming events that will happen in the new year. As Councilor Walker mentioned, we didn't want to schedule a lot, not knowing if we were going to have a facility in December and November. But in the new year, there are already fitness classes, dance classes, a Grandparent and Me series. Some of you aren't aware, our grandparents are becoming primary caregivers for a lot of young people in our community because of some of our opioid issues that are taking place. So a lot of our grandparents are becoming that primary caregiver. Cooking and nutrition classes, the drop-in times will be on the schedule moving forward now that we know the facility is ready and prepared, and then also lunch and learns. So we have a lot of activities that are planned. The fall program is a great resource for all the events that are scheduled, and you will be seeing as we try to work at how do we combine all those different activities so that there is one resource that people can go to see what's happening. Thanks.
No, thank you.
One comment, can I make real quick?
Yeah, really.
No.
I mean, quick, because
No,
this is reports and not.
Right, I understand. Just my concern, and again, what kind of prompted bringing this up was, I wanted to make sure that I understood that staff was going to work with the scheduling of this new senior community center. So I'm not saying that the Age Friendly group or somebody dropped the ball. I'm saying that I would think there'd be more coming out the door for the next 2 months that I thought staff was planning on, knowing that this was coming and they were going to start doing more with this new center. And we're now told it would be January before we really see anything there. So I just thought we'd be out of the gate faster and had the time to plan earlier. So that's my concern.
Okay, thank you. And now I'd like to open this up to the last open session of the night. The members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business which is not on tonight's agenda. I would ask you to state your name and address, and Mr. Pelletier, yeah, good to see you again. I will let you sit there, but we changed the protocol over, no, sit. But in the future, we're using the podium. But
I'm
please.
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
An old habit now.
No, take it fine.
Larry Pelletier, 129 2nd Street. And a couple of weeks ago, there was an article in the Sun and Journal from our freelance writer, Bonnie Washock, and spoke of how trick-or-treating has evolved over the years to hundreds of kids showing up at your home to trickle. I had one that night. But our United New Auburn Association for 9 years now has been sponsoring a Halloween celebration. And this past year we had a new event called Trunk or Treating, which people are doing around the nation, where you set your car on the side of the street and hand out candy to the kids. And I just wanted to let you know that that event on the 26th, we had 898 registered trick-or-treaters. So it was an outstanding event. I want to thank everybody that was involved. We had help from the police department, as we all usually do, from the cadets helping us to hold the traffic back, and all the other volunteers that helped us. So thank you very much for everyone.
No, thank you. And I'm kicking myself for not mentioning him. I'm glad he did. Thank you. That was a cool event. I was there. So, outstanding. Is there anybody else in the public who would like to speak? None being, end that second public.
Mr. Mayor, can I add to Mr. Pelletier's?
Yeah. You have to get up and sit down there for 3 minutes, so.
Wait a minute, I thought we weren't having
Too old to do that. 900, we had 898 registered people that went through the table that we registered at. But I want to back up to the week or two before that. There are so many hours that go into these type of things that nobody really knows about. We have meetings just like anybody else that's going to run some type of an organization that's going to be out there. We have many meetings. We go out and we ask people to help us by donating candy, or buy bags of candy and bring them to Rolly's Diner so that we can put them together to bring to the trunk-or-treaters, because we don't expect them to come there with 25 bags of candy. Larry was up on Dunn Street, Mr. Pelletier, was on Dunn Street with another person with an automobile. And the great thing was, Mr. Pelletier could walk down to Roy's little store on the corner of 3rd and Broad and say, holy smokes, I'm almost out of candy. What am I going to do? And this gentleman says, I've got a whole box that I'll give you if you would like to take it. So not only did Mr. Pelletier go there, a couple other people went there and said, "Oh, we're out of candy, we gotta go." He gave them candy to take back to where they had their trunk or treat. So people like that, and there are quite a few businesses in New Albany that participate in this. Besides the little committee that we are, that put the hours, the time, the effort to make this happen. 9 years, we almost hit 900. Next year's 10 years, it'll be on Halloween. We will go over 1,000 people, there's no doubt. And there's no other town around us that puts on the function for Halloween that we put on. May not be as fancy as some little towns, but we have more people participating than most any little town around.
It was nice, John. I'll now close this open session. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Forney. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a second from Councilor Titus. All those in favor by voice vote, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The ayes have it.